Welcome to Copy Chief Radio. Today's show is a new breed episode where today's most innovative marketing and copywriting stars share their most effective methods for optimizing results in the fast-changing world of direct response marketing. To check out all the Copy Chief Radio episode types, go to copychief.com/CCR. It's Kev. Thanks for being here with Patty Lennon. Patty, I met in Boston. We were having dinner. We were both speaking at an event there. Very quickly became fascinated with some of the work Patty does. In essence, helping people receive, meaning get paid what you're worth. Don't put up unrecognized resistance towards good things coming into your life. When we were talking about this, I immediately thought of so many freelancers that I work with and coach who really struggle with this. They undervalue, they try to guess what a client might be comfortable paying rather than just deciding what their price is and what they're worth and just charging that. And there's lots of ways to attack this logistically. But if the deeper issue is something inside you that creates friction around you receiving what you're worth, then it's going to be really hard to out-logic that force. And so I'm thrilled to have you here today, Patty, to share how you help people deal with this and other things that they put up probably unrecognized resistance to in their life.
I love the way you describe that, Kevin. Yes, I'm happy to be here.
Yeah, I'm really been looking forward to this one. So start where you want to, where you do when people come to you, and you're known for this now, so people probably come to you to solve this, or is it sometimes they come into your world and they don't even recognize that this is a problem for them?
When I started my business, I was a corporate banker. And so then I started business, and I think we teach what we need to learn, right? And so I thought leaving corporate banking, where I had managed millions and millions of dollars of budget in technology budget, in operations budgets. I had been a VP of sales and generated tons of business, managed all these people. I thought, running a business that was just me doing my work in the world would be no problem, right? And yet it was, because it's much easier to sell someone else's shit than it is to sell your own, right? Because it actually then connects to something far more personal. So that was like my first sort of touch point of this concept. Years passed, I was business coaching. I eventually got through it myself, had spent many years business coaching. And what I became known for was helping people overcome sales limitations and marketing limitations, like sort of glass ceilings. And the reason I was good at that was because I didn't make it a logistical solution. I went to the heart of what was going on. But the more I did that and the more I did it, it always came back to these childhood wounds around receiving. And so at one point in 2019, I'm a more woo person. So I talked to my spirit team on a regular basis, and they were like, you need to stop business coaching and open the receiving school and only teach that. The receiving school is not something I had thought about. Like, they told me the name and I started doing this work. So what we're going to talk about is really focused on business owners and, freelancers. When I do my work in the broader world, I'm talking about receiving at a broader level. And certainly it can be applied to this conversation. It can be applied to relationship issues, weight, health, all of it. So we could put it through that lens. So when people come to me or find their way to me, it's usually because I say something, in social media, on the stage, or wherever, where I say, do you have an easier time giving to others than you do receiving? And that statement typically lights something up inside a person who's, there's something in there that is ringing true. And that's why they come to me. Then we can get more granular to the conversation you and I are going to have.
Yeah, very interesting. That's a really simple way to put it. Why do we do that? Is it our brains?
Yeah, it is our brain. And actually, in this case, it's our brains. It's how we're socialized. So from a very young age, we are socialized to favor giving over receiving. And the way that looks is, if you're a small child with other kids and you share your toy with another child, most likely the caretakers around you are going to make a big deal of that. If they're watching, right? Especially in a learning environment. If you ask for something in a way that a caretaker doesn't like, but it might have been your best way of asking because you're at a level of frustration. If you do anything other than ask politely, normally you're reprimanded. And how many children really have the self-restraint to when they really want something to ask politely? That's a skill you learn as you get older. So our brains start to categorize receiving as bad and giving as good. Now, it's not that we keep getting hit over the head with receiving as bad. It's that receiving ends up being a neutral experience most of the time, meaning there's no good or bad, but giving gets a lot of attention. And the few times that we really actively try and receive, which usually looks like for small children taking, we're reprimanded. So receiving gets neutral, negative response, giving gets positive response, and usually pretty extreme. And so then our brain starts to just filter the world through that lens. And you go out into the workforce, you go to school, you go into a community. If you're the one giving to other people, you're the one that gets attention. If you're the one that's sitting back, and even look at how in the entrepreneurial space, when someone's making a lot of money, if the other person isn't, they're going to make some judgments. Right. And so that just keeps socializing and socializing and socializing. And so it really is a fundamentally mental process, but then it ties directly to worthiness. And that's when it becomes an emotional and a spiritual journey.
It's really interesting, because on the surface, you're going, well, it's nice to be a giver, right? Good people give things. They give their time, their attention, their money to important things. If we didn't have givers, it'd be a nasty, selfish world. When does it become a problem to want to be thought of as a giver more than a receiver?
The goal is to balance. That's what we think is, it's better to be a giver. Okay, well, I am an overgiver. Like by nature, I'm an overgiver. I know you are too, right? We just enjoy it. We're good at it. And I would imagine a lot of you listening are as well. It's what leads people into freelancing. It leads people into this kind of work, right? If that's the case, if someone wasn't receiving what you gave, how fulfilling would your giving be, first of all? And think about when you have given to someone where what you're giving them they need, right? Like a friend. And you're like, let's talk about you. Right now, you need the lens turned on you. And that person keeps trying to turn the lens back in the other direction. And you're like, oh my God, stop making this so hard. Right. So that's part of it. So the goal is to balance it because that's what creates naturally efficient systems, naturally healthy systems. So when we look at how are we meant to be, what I always like to see is go look outside, go look in nature, because nature is our teacher. Nature doesn't use the mind to modify. And so that's where we can see what actually naturally healthy process is. So when the wave goes out in the ocean, the wave comes back in. The moon is full, the moon is new. The sun goes down, the sun comes up. The leaves grow and then they fall to the ground and die, right? There's a giving and there's a receiving. There's an out and an in every natural process. So obviously that needs to happen. If we're giving, if we're sending out, that wave needs to be able to come back in. And if it doesn't, we end up in depleted states.
Are there simple indicators? Just little social cues, like compliments. People have a hard time taking a compliment. A lot of times they'll try to diminish it by saying, oh, I love your handbag. Oh, no, it's just cheap. It's just, this old thing, right? Or whatever. It's like they're embarrassed to feel good about something they are obviously proud of having.
Yes. And most likely their childhood wound, if receiving compliments is hard for you, back in my business coaching days, that would be a really key indicator that person probably has problems marketing well, because speaking about themselves is difficult. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's a big wrench in things these days for a lot of people. With social media, everybody feels like they should be on there and they should be, exuding positivity, but they're also told to keep it real. Right? So it gets complicated, but I don't want to digress from the real issue here, which is
we could go down that rabbit hole for a whole other hour.
Yeah, for sure. So what do we do if we find ourselves always wanting, because I remember when I suffered with this, what I would always do on projects or proposals, because I'm scared of the price, because to me it seems like a lot of money, right? And I haven't even said the price to my client.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times we all go through this. Like, you say the number you think is a big number, and they're like, okay, sounds great. And you're like, dang, shit, should have doubled it. It would have been fine. So we're the only one in this compromising game in the scenario oftentimes. And then what I would do is I would throw in a bunch of stuff that they didn't ask for, because that made me feel better about it. So, like, none of this was needed. It's painful to go through and evolve out of. Where do you begin helping people recognize and fixing this?
Yeah. So if we're going to zero in on, okay, you struggle with sales, you struggle with letting clients in or enough money in, getting the right amount of money. I like to look at the structure of a sales conversation. And because where you struggle in that process, and we can talk about the points, I'll tell you what the wounds are that typically, the receiving wounds that usually match up to that part of the sales conversation. So for instance, You said, when I speak the price, and I would imagine it's when you're ready to say the price out loud. And for those of you listening, if you're not actually having sales conversations, if your sales are happening via a web page or a talk or whatever it is, the structure is still the same, whether you're speaking on the page or you're speaking live. We'll go to that one first. So that's one point, whereas I'm going to speak the price. And so then, Kevin, think back then when you used to struggle with that. What was it that was going on in your mind or your thought process that made it hard for you? What was it that you were afraid was going to happen if you said that price?
I guess my biggest fear was what they would kind of yell and go, what?
Yeah.
Right.
So they'd be kind of
a reprimand. Yeah.
Yes. They would be angry with you. And that's a really typical fear to have, which goes back to likely when you were younger. It could have happened once in a very specific trauma-inducing way, or it could have happened at a very low level over time. When you demanded things as a small child, you were yelled at, and so that's the fear. And that fear goes to, I am not worthy of what I need, right? I am afraid that someone else is going to tell me I'm not as valuable as I inherently am.
And are hoping to be accepted as, in this instance.
Right.
And vulnerable. It's a vulnerable moment. Yeah.
It's extremely vulnerable. And that I love that you use that word, because that was one of the things I would find myself unworking with people who had invested a lot in sales coaching. And I am a huge fan of sales coaching. I think there's a lot of value in knowing how to do a sales conversation. Obviously, a lot of the people listening are copywriters. Knowing how to perform the sales process on the page technically is a great, great skill to have. But the problem is when you stay at it in that technical, logistical way, and you're just like, just say the price, just say the price, just say the price. Depending on how traumatizing that vulnerability is for you, you could really be putting yourself into crisis on a regular basis. And there's an easier way to do it, which is, yes, you're going to say the price. Yes, it's going to be hard. But in that space where you're saying the price, you're going to hold yourself. You're going to take care of yourself just by mentally reminding yourself, this is hard for me. I'm vulnerable right now, and it's okay. As opposed to, come on, do it. Just say the price, you're worth it, talking to yourself, that Saturday Night Live sketch where they whatever that character is that tells themselves that they're wonderful and beautiful and all that stuff,
Oh, right. Yeah.
That's one point in the sales conversation. But I actually find for a lot of people that their receiving issue comes up. And so basically, let me just actually close the loop there. If you believe you're unworthy, then you are waiting for someone to say that to you, right? You're almost in fear of that. And so you push your hands out in front of you energetically to any opportunity where that could potentially happen. And in the process of putting up that resistance, you resist everything that can come through that doorway, which is money, right? So you're like, I'm going to push away from that doorway because it's scary to me what could potentially happen, but you're going to miss out on everything else that comes through that doorway.
Look, I get it. I know there's so many communities, I'm doing air quotes, communities for entrepreneurs out there, all filled with their own version of overnight experts chirping at you from behind the screen. You got your Facebook groups, your clubhouse rooms, just experts galore. How often do you feel like you're being pinballed around from thing to thing and picking up a little bit, a little piece there? How much of that is actually making it into your brain and your fingers and your business and affecting your money? How many of these people are actually out there in the field getting their hands dirty and testing to find out what actually works and what flops? Well, in the Copy Chief community, a real community, you get shoulder to shoulder with the most active, successful marketers working in the trenches today, all while learning from industry legends who rarely teach anywhere else, if ever. Copy Chief is an amazing community, super newbie friendly. Also, you'll find, elite level marketers and copywriters in there. They're all working to become the best at their craft, get paid top dollar for their skills, stay ahead of the competition by keeping their finger on the pulse of what's working now. That's the X factor when you're backed up by a community and you can get any question you have answered by people who actually do this stuff and can tell you from real world experience what to do for your project, for your offer, for your funnel, for your clients. Man, you're unstoppable when you've got that kind of confidence. Go check us out at copychief.com/join. If you've never been a member, you're going to see what you've been missing and you're going to say, where has this been all my life? And if you've been a member in the past, I would invite you to come and check out all the new stuff. We've completely updated all the tech. So we're on brand new platforms. Everything is slick and smooth and easy to access. And it's never been better. Copychief.com/join. I'll look for you inside. So you're trying to avoid one part of it, one instance of it, but you're stopping everything that could incrementally help you just become more comfortable with getting paid more and those sorts of things.
Yes. And then the beautiful thing about it, I teach this in an entire process of like how to receive. But the great thing is that you don't even need a specific process in that particular case. What you just need to understand is if you hold yourself in a different light, like, oh, this is hard and there's a reason. But here's the thing. If I keep doing it, but being kind to myself, what's going to happen is I'm going to get money. And money creates a positive emotional reaction in our brains. And when you have a positive emotional reaction, meet an unconscious thought that believes something was dangerous, it starts to unpack that belief and replace it with a new one. Now, that doesn't happen the first sale you make, doesn't happen the second sale you make, but the third, the fourth, the fifth, depending on how big the sales are, all of a sudden your brain starts to say, oh, speaking the price gets us something we really want.
Right.
And so then the calculation of risk reward starts to change in your mind.
Yeah. I remember when I finally got comfortable with the value I knew I could provide and what it was worth. I'll never forget, I was working in a restaurant, like a Panera type place. And I had a sales call with these two guys on the phone. And I said my price for a sales letter. And the guy audibly gasped when I said it. It wasn't anywhere near what I ultimately charged, as I grew. But it felt good. I was actually, I actually embraced the fact because I knew that's okay because we're not a good fit. Yeah. If he thinks $6,500 for me to write all this stuff is, and he can't see how that's a logical price to pay for what he'll get in return, then we're not a match. And it started to feel good because it's like, otherwise, because what I would have done before is try to compromise or try to find out, how can I do it for half price? And the project never goes well because you're a mismatch. You're compromising yourself. And we have to remember the momentary discomfort of that sales conversation compared to a major compromise that now you have to drag through what can be a 4-week, 6-week project, sets it off on a really bad foot.
Yes. And what I love about that story too, Kevin, is that what I felt from you, and I'm going to put words in your mouth a little bit, is you could understand that that person wasn't ready to receive the quality of work that their project deserved, right? Like they were actually in resistance. So when we experience other people's resistance, but we're unhealed, it can kind of blow back on us. But once we're actually in a healed place around this, then you can just hold space for that person's own resistance, and it's neutral, right? It's not, or you can even have compassion, like, okay, you can find someone that's going to do it for 3,500. I know what that looks like. I know what the result of a 3,500 project looks like. And I have compassion for you because you're not going to have what you need.
Right. And that's ultimately what I would do. And that is kind of the win too. It's part of the evolution is like, oh, wow, now I get to refer this otherwise good client who can't afford me to somebody they can afford, and hopefully they'll go do great work together. But it doesn't have to be me. I think that's the growth moment where you're like, this is great. Like I can still give to both parties, but I don't have to suffer the consequences of my own sort of insecurities or fear around this. Sound like you had a list of things.
There's really a couple of key places in the sales conversation where it could be a different version of a receiving limitation. So at the beginning of the conversation, where you're going to open up space for what's going on for that person and really hear what they're going through. There's a place, and this usually happens in live sales conversations as opposed to on the page. But there's a place where someone jumps in to like solve the problem. So I don't ever get to the place where I can pitch my services because I've allowed them to explain to me what's going on. And I'm starting to solve that problem for them in that space rather than hold them in the discomfort of, I understand what the problem is, and I'm going to hold you in the discomfort of that problem not being solved. That can be really uncomfortable for people who are caretakers, who their wound is, I can't take care of me until I've taken care of you, right? I can't receive until you're whole. And so that can happen in copy too, where you don't go deep enough to the pain point. You never want to manipulate pain points, but you need to hold space for the gap of where they are and where they want to be. And understand it's an uncomfortable gap.
Right.
For that person to have the courage to invest in the service. But if your wounds are around, I don't get to take care of me until I know everyone else around me is okay, you're going to end up staying bloated in that part of the sales conversation. And the problem is you feel like you're doing a good thing for the other person. But in fact, what happens is it often makes the other person feel good enough to not invest. And then they walk away from the conversation and they get a day away from that conversation or even an hour. And they no longer have those endorphins that kind of made them feel safe, that oxy hit while they were talking to you. Now they're back having that problem. Now they no longer have access to you because the sales conversation ended.
Right.
And they're likely going somewhere else.
So true. And that, clearly, I went through this like cured it the hard knocks way, by the horrible disappointment.
Me too.
Of like exactly what you just said. I think I finally got so tired of going, I was trying to be nice and make friends and do all this. And then they went and hired Larry. And I know Larry didn't do any of that. So why am I exactly what you said? I'm hurting everybody here by trying to be quote unquote nice.
And then there's just one, I mean, there's a few more sub places inside the sales conversation, but the other big chunky one then is when okay, let's say you're good at holding that space for the problem and exploring the gap, what I call the gap. Now it's time to take them from speaking about the problem at a general level, speaking about the solution at a general level, and then transitioning them into your specific offer. And that is really the first time in the sales conversation where it becomes about you. And so if you have a wound where it can never be about me, it's always about someone else. This especially is true for children, adult children of alcoholics, children with parents who are narcissist or personality disordered, children who just for maybe we're one of 10 siblings. There's no space for it to be about you. Moving the conversation out of the general into the specific order, that is where that receiving sort of wound can show up. And again, for all of them, it's just about bringing consciousness and compassion to yourself for why you struggle at that point and then addressing it. And the cool thing is you don't have to build all your muscles in the sales conversation. I mean, we talked about like you keep asking for the price and eventually your brain starts to understand it's a good thing. You could actually just go take that same skill and go do it somewhere else. Like you could ask a friend who you normally pay for dinner because they just are always behind on money or whatever to split the bill, right? Like you could explore asking for what you need. You could explore taking care of yourself before you take care of another person, et cetera, in any other area of your life. And it's going to improve your sales conversations.
Oh, that's great. I love that. Yeah. Little harmless things that you, again, like you just have that instinct to jump in and be the giver. Just catch yourself. And if it's uncomfortable, you say, hey, let's go Dutch, just say it. And of course it'll be fine. And it won't be as awkward as you think. Little bits of proof that this can work the way you want it to, but you have to have the courage to fight past that instinct. That's great.
Yeah.
How does this play out for folks you work with? Like, when do they know they're kind of like arrived? Is it an ongoing process that they start to discover it in other areas, or is there an endpoint?
Yeah. So when we do this in the receiving school, so again, I'm not working exclusively with entrepreneurs. So there's a wide body of needs brought into it. First, no, there's no finish line. I mean, certainly with a sales conversation, you will get to a point where you can have a sales conversation without being triggered if you do your work 100%. So there's a finish line to that. But what we find with people who are really approaching this on a whole life basis. Because the thing is, if this is showing up in your sales conversation, it's showing up everywhere else. Right. It's not just in sales. What we find is most people come into the work wanting something concrete. They want more money. They want more clients. They want a new love interest. They want to lose weight. There's a problem that they're stuck in, and it's very specific and concrete. And by the end, what they realize, even though that problem was resolved, is that they didn't realize how much they resisted themselves, how hard they are on themselves. And now they're in this total place of self-acceptance. And suddenly all these things that felt hard no longer feel hard because they no longer belong to them. Like,
see them for what they are.
Your client's reaction to your price doesn't belong to you. Your friend's reaction to your success doesn't belong to you. The outside world's opinion of your body doesn't belong to you. And when all that's left is what actually matters to you, life gets simpler and more fun.
That's fantastic. Patty, this is fantastic stuff. I will definitely be linking to, you have a coaching program, thereceiving-school.com is where everybody can find that. I'll post that in the show notes, of course. And this is something where you take people in, and it's a course, essentially a program where you take them through sort of step by step how to recognize this and get past it.
Yes, yes. Right now, while we're recording this, the doors are closed because we're rebuilding it. It used to be taught in an 8-week sprint, and we're expanding it to a 12-month program, primarily because we find when someone takes it once, they generally keep coming back and taking it over and over again because they want to be in the process much more. So yeah, so it's a 12-month combination, modulated content and live coaching.
All right. So when this airs, which I believe will be early November, I think you'll be open. So if you're hearing this and want to work with Patty to help, if you recognize a lot of this in yourself, then I think this would be a great thing to consider. Just go to thereceivingschool.com and check out how it works. And you have a podcast as well.
I do. Space for Magic.
Yes. Space for Magic, and a book. Is there a book on the way?
There is. Make Space for Magic. It is out. Oh yeah, I've got a book. I've got an Oracle card deck. I got all the things. The one thing I don't want to forget to give everyone though, because we talked about it, is the sales script. If you've been listening, I'm not going to go deep when you download it. I don't go deep into like all these wounds and all that nonsense. I just find that one of the things that can make the wounds harder to manage is we've been taught very complicated sales processes. So this sales script will give you a very psychologically neutralizing experience of sales that is a proven formula that works. If you go to pattylennon.com/sales script, what it does is rather than giving you a script where you're like reading the words, it gives you 5 prompting questions that will move you through the sales conversation with your clients in a way that makes it easy for you to navigate where you are as well as them. So hopefully that makes sense. It's a one-pager.
Yeah, that's perfect. PattyLennon.com, just like it sounds. Patty with a Y, pattylennon.com/sales script. No dash or anything. All one word, sales script. Okay, great. It's all good stuff. Patty, this has been really, really delightful. And I appreciate you making time to share this with the audience.
Yes, thank you. So my pleasure.
Hey, don't forget your goodies. Head over to copychief.com/copychiefradio to get some great free stuff to help you put the things you hear on the show into action for your business. Copychief.com/CCR.